This is not just a pipeline. It connects two Israeli cities, but what's so interesting about it is that it used to be known as the Israeli-Iranian pipeline in the 1970s, because the two states worked on it together to transport crude oil through Israel to Europe. But that is a thing of the past.
این غده سرطانی از هنگام آغاز مرحله‌ای رشد کرده.
He pledged, quote, "There will be no Israel in 25 years."
The October 2023 terror attack on Israel by Islamist terror group Hamas has put this conflict on a whole new level, because Hamas is backed by Iran. Iran and Israel are among the biggest military powers in the Middle East, but they are very different. The Islamic Iranian regime denies Israel's right to exist, the only majority Jewish state in the world. But the conflict is about much more than Jews and Muslims. It's also about influence in the region and about Israel's number one ally, the US. Let's unravel what's behind it and what the dispute is really about. After Israel declared independence in 1948, Iran was actually among the first Muslim-majority countries that recognized the new state. So what happened then? The Iranian Revolution in 1979 turned everything upside down when the Western-backed Shah regime was toppled. Ruhollah Khomeini, the leader of the Islamic Revolution, believed that it should be exported throughout the Middle East and the world. He saw Israel as part of the so-called West in the middle of the majority Muslim world as a problem. And ever since, the Iranian regime doesn't recognize Israel as a state, and leaders don't even mention its name. This is one of Tehran's oldest squares. In 2017, this clock was unveiled here, counting down to 2040, to the destruction of Israel. Because that is part of the propaganda of the religious regime in Iran. The square is often the scene of protests like these, transporting the anti-Semitic, anti-Israel rhetoric of the Iranian authoritarian government.
Iran has been using this rhetoric of destroying Israel, but I think we need to be a bit careful distinguishing between rhetoric and reality.
That was Merzad Boroujerdi. He has written numerous books on Iranian society and politics, both in English and Farsi, so he really knows what he's talking about. The square we mentioned earlier, guess what? It's called Palestine Square, for a reason. After Hamas' October attack on Israel, people in Iran protested here in support of the Palestinians, some even in support of terrorist group Hamas. But remember, Iran is an authoritarian state, so these protests might not reflect what people actually think, because we've seen in the past that protests have been orchestrated by the regime. It's important to understand that ever since the Iranian Revolution, the Iranian regime presented itself as a vocal supporter of the Palestinians. So why is that? We asked Abed Kanani, an expert on Arab-Israeli relations.
Using this issue in order to get a recognition as a regional power in the Middle East.
And what he's saying is backed up by political scientist Merzad Boroujerdi.
The way to understand Iranian foreign policy is that they claim to be, quote-unquote, the leader of the Muslim world. They try to formulate this sort of rhetorical campaign that can resonate with the average citizen in the streets of the Arab Muslim world, where they say, we are the defender of the weak. We are the defender of the Palestinians.
We can't go much into detail on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. If you want to know more, check out our video about it. So now you know why Iran sees Israel as its enemy. But its influence literally spills over its borders. This is what Iran calls the axis of resistance. You have already heard of the Palestinian militant group Hamas, which attacked Israel on October 7, 2023, and is deemed a terrorist organization by the US and the EU. Hamas is not the only group in the region that gets funding and arms from Iran. These so-called proxy armies include Islamic Jihad in Gaza and the West Bank, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Syrian Armed Forces, Popular Mobilization Force in Iraq, and Houthis in Yemen. Backing Hamas gave Iran the opportunity to position itself as the leading supporter of the Palestinian cause in the Arab world. Just a reminder, most Muslims in the world are Sunni, including most Palestinian Muslims. So are most Muslims in Saudi Arabia, a big player in the region and the Iranian regime's arch enemy. Saudi Arabia and Iran actually compete for influence in the Middle East. Iran has a Shia majority, which is a different branch of Islam. Same goes for most Iranian proxies in the region, such as Hezbollah. So let's travel a bit further to the north, to the Lebanon-Israel border region. This area in southern Lebanon is under the control of Islamist militant group Hezbollah, which is, like Hamas, backed by Iran. And then there are the Houthis, which operate mainly in Yemen. Just take a look at their slogan. It says here in red, "Death to America, death to Israel, curse on the Jews." Basically, the same chants that we hear some 3,000 kilometers away in Tehran. The hatred against Israel often goes hand in hand with hatred against the United States. So there is definitely a common ideology with the Iranian regime and political support for the Houthis. But Iran denies sending the group weapons. Okay, so there are several militias outside of Iran's borders that are backed by the Iranian regime. And some of them have played a role in the aftermath of the October 2023 attack on Israel. In an escalation of the decades-long hostilities between Hezbollah and Israel, Hezbollah fired missiles into Israel the day after the Hamas attacks, and Israel retaliated with airstrikes in Lebanon.